Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Denes Boros, and this is the match between world champion Magnus Carlsen and challenger Nepo-Carlsen. So this game was a very interesting one, and again, this time Nepo-Carlsen felt like putting up a little bit of an extra pressure than he did before. So let's have a dig in it and see what happened. So e4, e5, both of these moves come as no surprise. Nepo-Carlsen has been playing e4, e5 for quite a while now. I mean, they're playing this anti-martial. That was no surprise again. Neither side is really deviating, and it's still fascinating how Nepo-Carlsen is staunchly targeting Carlsen's e5 system and also just going exclusively for e4. a6, bishop a4, bishop e7, and earlier he played h3 without much success, but here he goes for the other one with a4 where he actually got some advantage earlier. Rook b8, again a deviation instead of bishop b7 which was played, but already there Nepo-Carlsen had a little bit of a nibble. Rook b8, AB, AB, H3, somewhat of a sideline. It does give up the open file, and it's somewhat of an easier play for white. And conventional wisdom said that this is supposed to be pretty good for white. And actually that was still the case. D6, C3, taking away some squares, maybe even going for D4 and building a big center. And for that very reason, Carlsen goes for b4, so if you ever go d4, there is a chance of taking and pressing on that bishop on b3. So even though the rook on b8 may look a lot clumsier than it is, it actually putting some pressure on the bishop and the b file. For that very reason, Nepo goes for d3, solid, takes with the pawn, because if you take with the knight, there is this square that would be a little bit loose, and after bishop e6, this position is more or less okay for black. He takes c3, d5, and this feels a lot like Carlsen prep, trying to play an anti-martial in the anti-martial. Very, very typical play. It happens all the time. Now, Nepo-Carlsen is at crossroads at this moment to take the pawn or not to take it, but he goes for the sensible choice of just going knight d2 and avoiding any sort of complications, and I think that is very much legit. Black is going to get very active play on these files. There is plenty of play here and still a bit of a garage sale for white, so it's not anything special. In fact, it can get somewhat dangerous if white messes it up. So for that reason, Nepo goes for knight d2, which is way more solid, over defends the e4 pawn. D takes e4, D takes e4, bishop d6, queen c2, h6, and Nepo here goes for the regular knight f1, but even knight c4 might be an idea, trying to press on the d6 bishop and the e5 pawn. He goes for the regular plan, knight e7, knight g3, knight g6, and I'd say that this is that typical position where you have to strike as quickly as possible, and I do think that Nepo-Carlsen misses the momentum. Even here, I believe knight f5 could be interesting, and if case of knight takes c4, takes bishop d5, and yes, this may not be clear-cut advantage white, but it's not the position that Carlsen would be aiming for. He has plenty of weaknesses around his king and chances to actually score for Nepo-Carlsen. He goes instead for the steady bishop e3, and with every little move that Nepo-Carlsen makes, the advantage sort of fades. Queen e8, and even here knight f5 would be an interesting idea. Of course, you can't really take. Knight f4 is not possible due to this pin. If you take, I take your queen. And if you go knight e7, bishop a7, Karpov style, you hit that rook and you attack the e-pawn. Rook b5, of course, does not work due to bishop a4, and that it's gone. So already here, white could choose knight f5 or even c4, trying to press and push this bishop back, creating weaknesses along on c7 and e5. So in general, if we could call the previous game 4 a peanut butter game, well, this was Nutella for Nepo-Carlsen. But he's sort of just stalling a bit too long. And after rook d1, Carlsen actually gets in bishop e6, and you have no ways of avoiding the trade of the bishops. Knight d2, more trades happen, and that obviously is in favor of black, as he is the one who is a little bit passive and his weaknesses are more out in the open. Rook a1 takes, rook b8, rook a6, knight e8. And I kind of wanted to see knight f5 here. Nepo played king f1, but if you go knight f5, you may actually be able to go g4 h4 a little bit quicker than in the game. So that could be a little bit of an improvement, although it doesn't really change the situation. White is better, but it is holdable for Carlsen. King f1, knight f8, just rerouting the knight, maybe even setting up bishop c5 threats, and potentially, once the knight hops to c5, go after the e-pawn. Knight f5, knight e6, knight c4. Still some very nice pressure by Nepo, but it's just not enough, because Carlsen is holding the front with all those pieces. f3, and again, I don't like f3. It's a little bit slow, and I think Nepo-Carlsen just did not realize the speed that he need to have in this game. He had to go for g4 h4 earlier. f3 feels like a waste of time because you can't really go bishop c5. The e5 pawn is still hanging. He goes for f3, f6, king f7, h4. He's going for the clamp, but clamping by itself is just not enough. Rook a5, rook d5, and after a repetition, game ended in a draw. So thank you so much for watching this. If you enjoyed it, definitely consider subscribing to this channel. If you have questions, do comment below. I do feel that Nepo-Carlsen is making some headways, but the advantage is so little that Carlsen has a relatively easy time holding. If Nepo-Carlsen wants, he has to be a bit more aggressive, which incidentally is his original style, so he has to make a comeback to his original self if he wants to succeed. Now, for Carlsen, probably he's going to switch up the openings. He played e4, d4, all going for very forcing lines, and I think he's going to be more of the Rati English, so all these basic lines are on tally. I do think that we're going to see either knight f3 and then an eventual c4 play, or c4 immediately, because he played e4, d4 without much success. So I accept and expect some c4, knight c4, knight c3, or knight f3 happening. And I think that's what we can expect. We are going to have longer and longer games from Carlsen playing white, because he has to change tactics, and I think that is blindingly obvious for the world champion. For Nepo-Carlsen, he has to be aggressive, sort of the polar opposite what Carlsen has been doing and failing, because he had the advantage, but he just didn't push hard enough to break through. He had to go for knight f5 breaks in any case. So again, thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.